All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wesley Wilson. I'm an Army veteran and an MPA candidate here at Maxwell, and I did my research on veterans tax exemptions. So the focus of my research was how do veterans interact with the tax code? So I surveyed all the different exemptions available to veterans and really doing a deep dive in disability compensation and education and training programs. And what I wanted to know was, are veteran tax exemptions, are they fulfilling their design purpose? And if not, is there a better way uh, to allocate resources to assist veterans? And then also, what political challenges exist in changing current tax policy? So what I found was, in 2018, veterans received about $100 billion in tax-exempt payments, and they cover everything from insurance to payments under the GI Bill to grants for home improvement. And the largest category is disability compensation. It accounts for about $84 billion of that total $100 billion. And what I find is that a better way to meet program objectives and assist disabled veterans is to tax disability benefits to fund better services. So that's where I'd like to transition now and basically make the case of why we should be taxing veterans' disability compensation. So first, how the program works. The objective of the program is to compensate for lost earnings resulting from an injury. So the idea here is that if I hurt my shoulder, how much money could I have made with a fully functioning shoulder? And the VA calculates that, and I'm compensated the difference. It's on a scale between 0 and 100%. The majority of disabled veterans work, so it's not means tested, and it's treated as cash. So you can think of it as Venmoing me $16,000 a year. So it's completely tax exempt. I don't have to report it to anybody, and in that way, it's the least administratively burdensome. So here's my critique of it. In terms of estimating income loss to disabilities, it's really difficult to know true earnings loss on an individual basis. There's too many factors you would have to control for. So your best alternative would be to look at income and disability effects on average for the entire population. And what you have to consider is their earned income. So those who have a really high earned income, that would be a pretty good indicator that your disabilities minimally impact your earning potential. So your need for disability compensation would decrease. And conversely, if you had a really low earned income, that could be a good indicator that your disabilities really impact your earning potential. So then your need for disability might go up. So RAND did a study on this, trying to figure out if disability compensation payments were adequate. And they found that disability payments are higher than earnings loss for all areas of veterans and for most types of veterans. And those highest overpayments are for veterans with disabilities above 50%. And overall, disabled veterans are financially better off than their non-disabled veteran counterparts. So now the question is, how much? How much money are we talking about? So I pulled this directly from the study, and what you can see here is, on average, veterans who have an 80 to 100% disability rating, the VA has calculated that your earnings loss is about $17,000, and what you actually receive in compensation is $29,000. And once you incorporate the fact that it's tax exempt, it's actually worth $38,000 if you tax it at a 15% rate. So if you move up the marginal tax bracket, that exemption becomes considerably more valuable. So now the scale, like how many veterans are we talking about? So there's currently about 20 million veterans nationwide. Roughly 5.2 million of them receive disability compensation. And veterans' disability claims and costs have exploded over the past 30 years. So this is a graph illustrating that. You can see as the veteran population is declining, the number of new claims or disability recipients has increased considerably. And it really starts about 2003 for kind of obvious reasons. That's about in the time of the surge into Iraq. But overall, in the past 30 years, it's risen about 117%. But what's really interesting is the ratings that veterans are getting that kind of explains that growth. So veterans who have a really high rating, roughly those who have 70 to 100% ratings, they really dominate that growth. So how would you correct for overpayments? How would you deliver a policy that makes it more equitable for everybody? Well, if disability was treated as income, the progressive nature of our tax system would correct for overpayments, because as your disability As you move up in the tax bracket, your need for disability goes down, and the tax system would correct for that. And that would be a really targeted policy to all veterans. It would make it more equitable because the exemption is worth more to high income veterans. So in that way, it's actually pretty regressive. And it would better meet the program objectives of compensating for lost earnings, and it would satisfy your ability to pay principles of good tax policy. So the idea here is that those who have a higher ability to pay should pay more in taxes, and depending on what you did with the revenue, you could also satisfy your benefits principles. The idea that those who benefit from public services should be the ones to pay for those public services. So what to do with the revenue? This is what I would do. The CBO has estimated that if you tax veterans' disability, you would raise about $64 billion in revenue. And if you use that money to fund a veterans' disability grant program, you could really push the needle on a lot of Veterans Affairs policy issues. And so this is what I would do. I would fund these 3 different areas. So starting first with veterans transition, there's a lot of research that says veterans who have a successful transition are reintegrated back into their communities have far fewer issues further down the road. But despite its really known importance, we don't really spend that much money on it. On average, about 200,000 veterans annually will leave the service, and we spend roughly $600 to $700 per pupil. So if we beef that up, we'd be able to help veterans right out of the gate. Veterans research, we don't really have a good grasp on veterans suicide, traumatic brain injury, polytrauma, and a number of those issues. So if we better understood them, we would be better addressed to, or we would be better equipped to address them, excuse me. And then lastly, VA modernization and program evaluation. This one kind of speaks for itself, but the idea is that if the VA had the best tools available, they could provide the best services. So finally, the political challenges of altering policy. It's a really sensitive topic amongst lawmakers. No lawmaker wants to be caught dead saying anything bad about veterans. And that really kind of contributes to this politics versus policy issue. And that oftentimes what's really efficient policy isn't good politics. And probably nowhere is that more true than in the veteran space. And you'd also have to deal with the big 6 veteran service organizations. There's more than just 6, but these organizations like American Legion, Veterans of Foreign Wars, they have a lot of legislative power in DC. They are headquartered in DC. They have a huge membership base, and they control a lot of what happens in the veteran space. So ultimately, if you wanted to change tax policy, you would have to convince the lawmakers and the largest veteran service organizations that it was a good idea. So in summary, I want to be very clear about what I'm advocating for. I'm not saying we should tax veterans' disability just because we've calculated that they get overpaid. What I am saying is that we have a lot of unsolved veterans policy issues. Our women veterans are having a really hard time transitioning out. We haven't, between 2008 and 2016, we've had about 6,000 veteran suicides. And just in summary, a lot of our brothers and sisters are not doing very well. So that $84 billion is an over-allocation of resources. We could get the job done with far fewer dollars. And we should focus on providing better and more tailored services. We should be focusing on providing a transition assistance program that takes account everybody's unique experiences and reintegrates them and their families back into their communities. And we should focus on getting ahead of suicide and polytrauma and TBI, and taxing veterans' disability is a way to do that.